Alright, is there anything to discuss today?
Oh, hey, Boone. Uh, hey, yeah, just I think we should start real quick meeting this week. So for anybody that comes in, I'm just giving kind of an update. Um, so I've added a bunch of stuff to the document. Hold on, let me share real quick. Um, so all of the different sections that have there's a whole bunch of notes throughout the transaction layer stuff, which is where I'm focusing right now. Um, And um, I had a conversation with Jeff in the last week, and we're kind of it's a couple of things I guess that we've knocked out. I think so. One of the things we were talking about was ECC, and several points to document. I talk about how do we handle non-ECC, and I think we decided to kind of keep it as simple as possible. So for systems that don't want to support ECC, all of the non-credited types that we have right here, we're going to keep the bits as reserved and just say, okay, you just ignore the ECC bits on the RX end if you don't support. So I think one of the things I had previously called out in previous meeting was maybe doing new types, but that's probably too much effort. So and the bits are still there. So if we decide to do that in 2.1, we're capable of doing that. So right now, no change to the types for non-ECC. The other options, again, I went over this all with Jeff, and I think we're still being discussed. So um, I've added more to it. So if you're ever curious, it's all in the document right now. But different options I think we have for different um, ways of doing credits and virtual wires. I think the big question I ran into was how do we if we're taking away restrictions on how many TLPs we do in an LLP, um, do we need to add crediting to non-credited types? I think my brief answer is no. So I think everything that's non-credited now will remain non-credited. But then the question is how do we solve some of the other problems with that? Do we, for instance, if somebody wanted to pack a whole bunch of virtual wires into a LLP, how do you handle corner cases like that? And so I think the answer there is to come up with is take away the old restriction and then add new restrictions around each one. And I think that's where we are at the moment. Um, I'm trying to think about what makes the most sense here. And each of these things have different impacts when talking about taking away when if again if you don't credit them, what's the new restriction in LLP if you can allow people to send more than one in an LLP? For credits, the obvious problem is that if you're trying to add um, too many credits to the same streams in a given LOP, then you run into a timing problem, with um, just the math there, trying to add those credits in as they go upstream. All the credits, though, again, will all be at the transaction layer, so it's less of a problem. But there needs to be like a number here, so you just can't have 16 or 32 or whatever it is credit packets in an LOP. I think my general thought is, if we're going to increase the LLP size, then for all the non-credited stuff, the easy answer I think is just make it like something like two. So you can do two of any given non-credited type in an LLP, and then that makes sense. Um, and then maybe that is something we scale if we make the LLP size variable, which is something that was discussed in the past too, like have a short and a long LLP that you choose at link initialization. But um, That's kind of TBD. The other thing is, again, with the old system that David had, having not only one of each type in an LOP made a bunch of other use cases kind of simple. Like for instance, virtual wire. Um, you know, you don't ever have to worry about somebody toggling a wire because you can't turn it on and off in the same LOP. But if we allow more than one virtual wire, more than one TLP in general, and especially virtual wire, then you run into problems like this where, okay, what's the defined behavior here? And again, back down to restrictions, I would just say you can't have more than one of the same virtual wire in a LLP, that kind of thing. So I need to quantify those for a proposal. Um, like I said, Jeff's been thinking about them. If you think about something offline, Boone, just let me know, and we can discuss that as well. Lastly, the messaging. Um, Jeff had a big thing about making bigger messages because the actual message packets in UCIe and in MCTP and stuff like that, they're large. They're like 64 bytes by themselves. So if we're going to be streaming those message formats um, over the link layer, how do we handle that? And um, after a bunch of thinking, my personal opinion is I don't think we should be making a larger message packet in the non-credited types. Um, I think this type of packet that we define in the spec here is really for low bandwidth messaging, and it's meant to be a dedicated bandwidth channel, right? Because you're guaranteed, it's non-credited, so you're guaranteed one or n number um, of these TLPs for each LLP, right? So you can consider it a specific amount of bandwidth. And so I think if people really want to have more high bandwidth message types, then they should just put that in their profile. And then if you put it in the profile, then it's credited, and then you don't run into problems of like, running out of uh, FIFO space on the RX side and things like that, right? Because that would be the other big problem here. If we had like a short message and a long message, the long message would eventually need to be credited effectively, right? Because you can't just absorb infinite, you can't necessarily absorb infinite amounts of bandwidth on the other side, the full pipe on the other side just in the message queue. So again, keep the short message uncredited, and if you want a long message, then you should do credited. And I'll probably put a note in the document saying specifically about that. Um, I think that's it for updates. Again, I think I talked to Jeff about the link layer LLP size. I think he's pushing for a 24 granule LLP now, and though like I said, I'm not sold on that still because it's 16 now. 32 kind of makes sense, but then he wanted a 24 because he thought it was a middle ground. Um, I don't think I have a problem allowing it to be 24, but I think the question would be what is your um, what is the real trade-off here if you do that? Are implementations going to be shoehorned into a specific mechanisms here? I think David's original idea around 16, though, was that you could actually assign some of the muxing logic to be byte lane based, right? So, because the LLP header, is defined to a specific granule and that it is always in the same spot on the on in the LLP, and then that LLP is size is aligned to the width of a typical 16-bit slice, then you could put the LLP decoding hardware on a specific byte lane of the die to die. And again, because I guess we're doing other um, phi layers now, you know, does that does that even matter? If we were to like increase the LOP size, right? I mean, you could still do that, I guess, even if it was 24 granules long. But then you would also you'd have to put that logic there, and you'd have to be able to mux in data as well on that same byte lane. But I guess that's true for 32 granules too. Um, and then the other question there is like what is the ROI for complicating the design as well, right? If we go to 24 or 32 granules, you're getting 5 to 10% efficiency increase. Is that is that worth the effort or potential complication you know, if we do that? Then if we do that, is it something we want to make optional or mandatory? So I think that's a big question as well. So I'm working on the transaction layer stuff. I think at first I'd like to get all of that streamlined. Because I think regardless of whether we do a larger LOP, it's something we need to sort out, because these corner cases aren't necessarily tied to the LOP size, but eventually we'll have to decide the LOP, which comes down to a lot more on the implementation cost and stuff.
Okay.
Anyway, I think that's it. That's all I have for this week. Hopefully, I'll have some final text by the following week. Need to our next meeting 2 weeks. I am I need to figure out how to get more people involved in this meeting before we get um, final stuff done. But again, this is all.
Do you have access to those site, the Balflexi, and have a look at it as well?
Sorry, can you say again?
The Balflexi document that is not yet released, and have you had a look at it as well?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Which the bow which document?
Flexi,
SE?
Balflexi.
Oh, bow flexi document. Yeah, Morgan has been sending out versions of the bow flexi document. I've started writing a bow flexi chapter here about how do we map bow flexi, or how do we map the link layer to bow flexi. Um, but I don't have it. I've just got the initial assumptions and stuff like that done. Or have you been seeing? Are you on the bow flexi working group? Have you been looking at the document?
Uh, Review it once, but I forget already. What I mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I took a look at the one a couple of weeks ago, but I haven't had a chance to look at the newest one. And like I said, I owe Morgan some text around how we plan on mapping the transaction layer to the Flexi. So I'll actually probably work on that now, and so I can get him something before his meeting this afternoon for me. All right, I think that's it. I don't think we're going to have anybody else join. So did you have any other comments?
No.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'll end it here then. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Bye.